welcome. Is it that there's an extra number or two here today? The room looks a bit full. Today we're going to have a short press conference, right? Welcome to members of the national community who are joining us on your various platforms. I'm here just to spend some post-cabinet time with the media from Trinidad and Tobago. I brought a couple of things that I want to raise, and you might have a few that you may want to raise, because I'm not sure when we have another press conference since the Parliament is on recess, and I myself may not be around all the time. Let me begin today with the first thing I want to deal with today is the issue of our effort in responding to the crime and criminal element in Trinidad and Tobago. I know that we have been challenged from, well, I would say on a daily basis by various outrageous actions of certain members of our national community. So that is not unknown to us. We have been at the level of the cabinet seeking on an ongoing basis, seeking to respond using a whole of government approach, as we say from time to time, where everything that's available within the ambit of the government to respond, we have been doing the best that we could with that. The problem is quite intractable, and therefore I wouldn't be surprised if, you take the normal position that, you need to see this or you need to see that. The government puts out as much as we could on a sustained basis. But you also would see and hear and read that the government is not supposed to do this and not supposed to do that. One of the things that the government is not supposed to do is to interfere with the police work as the police go about dealing with the criminal element. But there is a certain amount of monitoring and cooperation and collaboration that is required between the police and the cabinet and the National Security Council. We cannot operate as separate silos. Otherwise, we would just be benefiting those who choose crime as an activity or a way of life. I have been managing this situation now for a number of years, and one of the concern demands of the Prime Minister is to change the minister. We've done that 3 times. We're into our 3rd minister. In the period that I've been Prime Minister, we started out with Minister Edmund Dillon, who was head of the Defence Force at one stage. He got elected and became a member of Parliament. He managed the response through the security agencies for a while. I don't think he had an easy time. I don't know he was ever welcomed and given any pips for the job that he was doing, because it's quite a thankless job, and a lot of people don't understand what really goes on in trying to respond on a daily basis to these outrages. Then after a while, he was replaced by Minister Young. Minister Young was a different person. He was a corporate lawyer who had some experience in the cabinet, and he took over. I think he was even received with less enthusiasm. He had a very rough time, but Minister Young held the portfolio and did quite a good job in bringing us to put what we can bring to bear on the issues and trying to suppress the criminality that was so in your face in this country. Then we've had Minister Hines, who has been, as you know, your favorite minister. But one of the things that has emerged from where I operate, which is at the office of the Prime Minister, is that this Ministry of National Security, the police, which is the agency that is required to do the government's work, because very few other agencies directly interface with the criminal element. The police is a very special place in that they are the officers with the authority to physically and otherwise confront with and handle, suppress, and in many instances they are the first responders to criminal conduct. The Ministry of National Security is one that's, many people think that Minister Hines only deals with murders, the murder news that the criminals generate. But today I want to just mention to you, for your own edification, the breadth of that ministry. And I brought with me today the schedule of the Minister of National Security. It deals with airspace and territorial waters, the cadet force, citizenship, the Defense Force, Regiment, Coast Guard, Air Guard, Defense Force Reserves, drug enforcement, interdiction, drug trafficking and money laundering, forensic services, DNA services, global security issues, immigration, intelligence, internal security, management of illegal immigrants and deportees, national emergency and disaster management, offender management, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, the ODPM, payroll and prisoner management, community service, rehabilitation, youth reoffender program, probation services, public order and safety and law enforcement, police service, fire service, prison service, lifeguard service, security of government officials and premises, and supplemental police. That is the whole schedule of the Ministry of National Security. But in there at this time, the police is of great interest to the cabinet, to me as Prime Minister, where we believe that the police needs special care and attention, special monitoring, special review, and of course, special guidance in some instances. And of all the things that we have been doing, as we look to see what else we can do to bring about more effective response by using the police assets to treat with our criminal response problem, I've come to the conclusion as Prime Minister that we should have additional governmental cabinet resource in the Ministry of National Security, specifically to treat with the police. I have been interfacing with the police on a regular basis as Prime Minister, as Chairman of the National Security Council. I meet with senior persons in the police service on a fairly regular basis to receive their reports as to how things are going, how they're responding. Only recently I met with the Commissioner of Police, the 3 deputies, the heads of all the divisions, and other associated persons like the head of the CDS and the head of the prisons and so. And they would tell me and my colleagues of the cabinet what is happening, how things are going, and what can be, done to improve their effectiveness. That sometime before we met in a similar way, and they did say they did need some more vehicles to have a more effective police patrolling arrangement. The cabinet responded by providing the money so that they can get 50 vehicles at short notice. We got that done. So that's how things have been going. But today I want to tell you that I have advised the President to add a minister to the Ministry of National Security, and that minister would focus under the guidance of the existing minister. This minister in the ministry will work with the current minister to focus specifically on police issues, policing issues, police response issues, and police problem issues, because I can tell you there are a lot of problems in the police service. not the least of which is a very simple one. Like some of the more effective police officers have accumulated some significant leave and, of course, have been off on leave. Some of them, we literally have to consider bringing them back from leave because of specific issues in the police service that require their expertise, their know-how, and their very presence. So those are the kinds of discussions we've been having with the police, and we believe that an additional management interface with the government, with the cabinet, is required. So I have appointed MP Keith Scotland as Minister in the Ministry of National Security, particularly to deal with police issues, police government issues. And so if you look at the schedule, you would see when you have a minister in the Ministry of anywhere, that minister, it says that the minister will do what the minister says or directed to him. So there are 5 areas that I expect that Minister Scotland would focus on, not the least of which is the police. And of course, offender management, management of illegal immigrants, and drug trafficking and money laundering, along with drug enforcement. These are some of the main police assignments. So that is the change that we will make. And of course, he will also be, because this matter is so frontal in Cabinet's activities, this minister would also, like the Minister of Communication and the Minister of Gender Affairs, would also be in the Cabinet so that their work will be directly available to the Cabinet. Actually, when I did read out to you the work of the Ministry of National Security, I had a whole page here which I didn't mention of the various committees that exist within the Ministry of National Security, which also requires the minister's attention. So this is all, there are committees on to do with power of pardon, the Mercy Committee, Citizen Security Program, Citizens Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, Defense Force Commission Board, Defense Council, Firearms Appeal Board. These are all part of the Ministry of National Security, and from time to time attract the attention and the work there of the minister. So let's leave that there for now. The other thing that I want, small but important, recently I went to India and, as I've said before, advocated for our country's interests among a number of people in India. I didn't go to the state of Haryana, but the government officials at Haryana, which is one of the new smaller Indian states, very strong in agriculture, they got to somehow, they were not in my presence when I was there. I didn't speak to them directly. But what I said in India got to them, and they decided, when the team was being put together to come to Trinidad and Tobago, they decided that they wanted to be a part of that team. And they did come here. They arrived the day after the main team and joined the main team here. You might have seen that in the news here. Three important people came down from Haryana. And they were the chairman, the chairman of the Haryana State Cooperative Supply and Marketing Federation Limited. It's called HAFED, Haryana State Cooperative Supply and Marketing Federation Limited. So the chairman and 2 managers came and spent a couple of days here with us. And this HAFED is the largest apex cooperative federation in Haryana state in India, which is a major food producing state in India. It processes 2.3 million metric tons of commodities annually and has an annual turnover of approximately 1.6 billion US dollars. So it's quite a substantial entity. During the visit to Trinidad and Tobago, the cooperative held a number of meetings with public and private sector entities locally and is actively considering the establishment of a rice mill in Trinidad. They're considering that that is something that they could do based on what they've seen and what we think is of interest. And of course, they're currently issuing invitations to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries and NFM to visit Haryana to tour their facilities sometime during August. But interestingly enough, surprisingly to us, by a letter dated the 4th of July, HAFED has advised that it will donate a container of 25 metric tons of premium quality basmati rice and 20 tons of parboil, which is 20 tons of parboil and 5 metric tons of steamed rice, and a container of edible oils to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is a gesture which I welcome on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago from some people who have seen us, come to visit us, and have taken the decision that we could do things together. Because of its strength in agriculture, there are possibilities of the state working with our universities here and our agriculture equipment requirements can be looked at so that together we can do something that could benefit the farmers in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as improve our supply situation. You may recall during COVID at one point in time we were afraid that we would not be able to buy food because international food purchase had become quite difficult and frighteningly so. So we will accept, Cabinet today accepted this offer, and the Ministry of Trade will take steps to ensure that we receive it in the proper way with all the documentation. When it gets to Trinidad and Tobago, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services will come up with a program for distributing this to the needy people of Trinidad and Tobago. So you will hear more about that. But the best news that I have for you today is that Minister Young has just come back from Venezuela. I don't know but I know his Spanish must be very good because he's made a lot of visits to Venezuela. And those visits are all in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to say, I think I've said this before, but let me say it again today so that you can understand what we have been doing. Our economy now and for quite some time is heavily dependent on our natural gas business, either from Point Lisas, where we are using natural gas as a raw material to produce fertilizers and methanol and so on, or as LNG, which goes out as a liquid in tankers for energy export. Those two industrial activities are the major contributors to the revenue, the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Point Lisas Industries and the LNG plant. Without them, we will be in real trouble. We'll survive, but the quality of life that we have become accustomed to will not be available to us. Because the quality of life, notwithstanding that we spend 3/4 of our time bar talking ourselves, but we do enjoy a significantly improved and worthy quality of life that is funded from that sector, the hydrocarbon sector. Oil, LNG, Point Lisas. That's where our revenue comes from mainly. Our reserves have been considerably reduced because it's now about 28 to 30 years that we have been extracting the gas that we had found. And gas is not like a plant that grows as you cut it, it grows up new leaves. When you extract it from the ground, it's gone. You have to look for more. So when the field that you have been using or the pool, and one of the things about Trinidad's geology, unlike the Middle East and somewhere else in Venezuela and so, we have our reserves, because of the geology, the area is very broken up. So the gas and the oil occurs in pools, separate pools, not like in the Middle East where you drill one well and you have a huge reservoir of thousands of units and so on. In Trinidad, you have to be a really good geologist to find it. You may not know that Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad in particular, is one of the most highly studied areas. If you look at the map of Trinidad, the geological map of Trinidad, it's really, really intensely studied. And it goes way back to, the period when we started out in the early days extracting oil from the ground. So we're very well studied and very well utilized. But our proven reserves have considerably been reduced. And you notice that when you hear that at one time we were producing on a daily basis 4.1 or 4.2 billion cubic feet of gas, but now we're only producing about 2.6, 2.7, and we have to find gas on an ongoing basis even to keep that low level going, otherwise it's going to keep falling lower and lower. It's not the first time or the first place where people's reserves have run out, because reserves do run out. They are what you call wasting assets. As you take them out, that much less is there. You may recall there was a time when England was a big producer of oil from the North Sea, or North Sea oil. There were major oil operations going on in the North Sea until, in fact, it was used up and much of it has gone. So now you hardly ever hear about North Sea oil. You may have also heard that Chile used to produce hydrocarbon at one stage, but then you see the plant being dismantled and taken away from Chile because the raw material has gone. So we in Trinidad and Tobago, when our reserves started showing up as only based on the rate at which we've been consuming it and the rate at which we want to consume it, because we have the plants there wanting gas. When we look at our reserves, you were seeing that we had reserves, proven reserves, of about 10 to 12 years. Now, that sounds like a long time to some people, but for a planner and a government, that is like tomorrow. Because when I came into office as Prime Minister in September, that was 9 years ago. So if at that time we only had gas for 10 years, it means that the supply would have ended next year. You get my drift? So if we want to stay in the business, as we must want to, because it is so important to us, then what the government has to do, as well as dealing with crime, as well as dealing with old talk, you have to look ahead down the road to make sure that 10 years or 15 years from today, or even less than that, 7 years from today, 5 years from today, you have a supply of gas so that you don't run out and not be able to operate the plants. We've tasted that. Train 1 is now out of operation for how many years? It must be going on to 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. Train 1, the first LNG train, is 4 years now it has not been operating because we don't have the gas. That's train 1. 2, 3, and 4 are operating on the gas that we have. The first thing we had to do as people in Trinidad and Tobago, because train 1 had to go out because we didn't have the gas, your government had to change the rules, change the game to get ourselves involved in 2 and 3 and 4. And we spent 2 or 3 years doing that. That has been done, right? We also now had to look outside of our border. Fortunately, we have neighbors who have reserves that have not been brought to market. And of course, those neighbors talking about Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname. Closest neighbor with the proven reserve is Venezuela. Unfortunately, Venezuela has been, in the geopolitical environment, has been having problems, but that doesn't change the fact that Venezuela is our closest neighbor and has gas close to us, including some gas on the border, where the borderline runs through a couple of fields, where some of it is Venezuelan, some of it is Trinidad and Tobago. We immediately embarked upon targeting those two sets of gas. Number one, the actual Venezuelan field in Venezuela, the Dragon field, which is 18 kilometers from our Hibiscus platform. This government, looking down the road to want to stay in the business and knowing that it is quite likely that we'll get to a point where we don't have enough gas to continue, some of our plants at least, and at worst, all of our plants. Because you see, another point you got to understand, we can't only have gas and use it up to the end on the plants. Because long before we get there, we have to reserve gas for Tiantec to make sure that we have gas to continue generating electricity. So long before we come to a point of saying, well, we have to stop directing gas to our plants for export, we have to reserve. So if we only have gas for 10 years, we can't use up all the gas and get to year 10 and say, okay, we have no gas at all, which would mean that the gas supply to Tiantec is in the same position. We want to make sure that we do have, even beyond the point Lisa's life, that we have gas to generate electricity. Because we are one of the few countries in the world where 100% of our electricity is generated from natural gas. So the first call on whatever gas we have left is for our electricity supply. And then what we keep exporting gas through our producing arrangements on the coast. So we got, you're familiar with what happened with Dragon. We got Venezuela to agree for the first time to export its gas, and we end up with documentation. We end up in a period of U.S. sanctions against Venezuela. We spent some significant effort negotiating our way out of that, building friends and relationships in Washington, and that paid off dividends for us that we eventually got from the Office of Foreign Assets Control. We got an OFAC license, and we got a lease from Venezuela for 30 years to extract gas from Dragon Field, and Shell is working on that. But that, we then turned our attention to the gas that we share with Venezuela. Smaller volumes, but very important. Loran Manatee. There are 3 fields on the border where our borderline runs through those 3 fields. Loran Manatee is the main one, but we only have 27% in there. Venezuela has 73%. The bottom line is that we spent 15 years trying to follow the normal procedure of unitizing it, and 2 countries together will extract it together. Of course, that didn't get anywhere because Venezuela had different ideas to what they want to do. They wanted their gas to go to Venezuela. We want our gas to come here. And as a result of that, you never got anything done. But because of our desperate situation, we spent time in Venezuela, and we got an agreement that Trinidad and Tobago will extract our portion from the field. And of course, that is now being worked on. You would have heard the last news on that was from Shell, where McDermott, the company McDermott, has been contracted, and Shell has committed money. But there's something that happened there which you need to know. Notwithstanding some of the useless conversations that take place here, because we have been able to get that agreement in Venezuela, one of our main constructing companies in Trinidad has got a future, TOFCO, that build platforms. You remember, take your platform and go? Well, we do build that here, right? So we were able to encourage, and the mentor platform is due to go out sometime soon. I visited them a few months ago, and they were doing very well. We have top-class, world-class workers down there. that topside is due to go out from there. And of course, I am expecting that with the commitment to McDermott, that some of that work is going to come to Tufco, and with our high quality constructors on the Tufco yard would get some opportunity. So as these works take place, the linkages are also important, because without them, those people who work at Tufco, those high-class, high-quality workers who are building these world-class items, they would have nothing to do, right? So, and of course, the benefit that comes to us will not be there. And of course, having put aside Dragon, all the work is done there. It's just to continue. Our documentation is there, the arrangements, the terms and conditions, the term sheets, all that sort of thing. And then we can now say we can put aside now Manatee, and immediately after that, we put our effort onto the next field, which is Coquina, right? And that field, Minister Young has been working with that, using the very similar template that we use for Manatee Loran, right? So Coquina has now been signed and sealed. Minister Young has just come back with this document from Venezuela, which is basically a repeat of the Loran Manatee, right? Coquina Mannequin is now leased to Trinidad and Tobago for 20 years, and we are well advanced. We got our OFAC license for that as well. So we now have 2 substantial fields of proven gas available to Trinidad and Tobago for ensuring that we have some element of a future in keeping Point Lisas at an operational level and keeping Trinidad and Tobago in the hydrocarbon business. So I think with all that is happening, something good is also happening. And we really need to appreciate what it means to have additional gas supplies. Because without it, the bills that we are paying now for the quality of life that we enjoy will not be available to us. We spend approximately $5.5 billion TT on our social program in Trinidad and Tobago. In every budget, there's over $5 billion in social support, meaning the government gives cash to people. You will hear some people who are either just malicious or just ignorant of the facts talk about this not happening and that not happening and that not happening. It usually is because they have no interest in what is happening and spend all their time finding. You could find any amount of things that don't happen. I don't fly, and I've been to the moon, right? But the bottom line is there's a lot that's happening, and it is not to be taken lightly that the government, as a standard practice, allocates in a budget of approximately just over 50 or 50 odd billion dollars, that $5.5 billion of that is cash that goes out to some people every month. They receive a check. So if the revenue stream in the country begins to be significantly reduced or even say drying up, then those are the kinds of things that will disappear from the lifestyle in Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, during the very difficult period that we've gone through here recently, we've actually increased the output in that. Another thing too is that you find that in recent years, we have removed the burden of taxation on incomes for a lot of people. And the Manning government, in the first move we made on that, was to remove taxation, income tax from the people who were earning $60,000 or less per year. We moved that up consistently. It is now, where is it now, 70, 72 or 75? If you're earning $7,000, right? If you're earning $7,000 a month or less, you pay no income tax. There was a time when everybody paid income tax and had to file a tax return, and what you pay is pay as you earn. You earn a small amount to pay. But to bring relief to those at the lower earning scale, that, and again, the last shift we made on that was during this period of difficulty, where we actually allowed a little more of your we lifted it to allow more people to come to escape the tax net. So, and these are only two examples. There are many other examples you can look for. Just look to see where the government spends money. And that would be at risk in the event that the income is not there, the revenue is not there. So we are focused very heavily on trying to find security for our revenues. Barbados is exploring in their waters offshore. We signed a memorandum of understanding with Barbados that in the event that you find gas, we have an arrangement in place where any gas that you don't need onshore in Barbados, you have a market in Trinidad and Tobago. We've done the same thing with Grenada. We've done the same thing with Guyana and Suriname. So eventually, we may be in a position to access gas outside of Venezuela. And having set the template with Loran Manatee and now Coquina, Loran Manatee and now Coquina Manikin, we may very well be able to access other sources in eastern Venezuela, which is still to be properly explored. So, you know, the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela is one that is of great value to us, and we have declared the Caribbean a zone of peace, and we trust that that would be so for time immemorial. So, ladies and gentlemen, some good things are happening, and some not so good things are happening, but the job of the government is to make sure that we try to preserve for Trinidad and Tobago a quality of life that we have aspired to and in some instances have become accustomed to. If you have any questions, I'll take them now and maybe we can spend a few minutes longer. Yes, Jewel?
In terms of this the new position in cabinet, the minister who will be directly dealing with issues of the police service and so on. How does that work? Because you're chairman of the National Security Council. Normally your interactions are directly with the police commissioner and so on. So has that changed, or what exactly will happen?
None of that will change. We just have an additional person in the group. And in the case of Minister Scotland, is a very experienced person. And the police do have a lot of issues surrounding law and management of law and law managing police and all of that. But it's not new. You remember Minister Hines used to be Minister of the Ministry of National Security, and he was responsible for the prison. Right now, Minister Webster Roy is in the Prime Minister's office, and she manages for the Prime Minister. I'm the Minister of Gender Affairs, in case you all didn't know. But Minister Webster Roy, in the Prime Minister's office, she manages that children and gender, and she's in the cabinet. So those issues, in fact, only today I put a subcommittee in place through that ministry to deal with school leaving, right? The children issue, right? And so that comes straight to the cabinet because that minister who's dealing with that is directly in the cabinet. So, and we've had that before. And all it means that we've added an extra person. One of the things we did in the government that I led, we tried to run the country with a reduced cabinet size. And we've done that. I mean, there are only 23 members in the cabinet, and now add another person. That's still way below what it was in the previous times when I think there were over 30 people in the cabinet. And that has been our style. We've run this government since 2015 with a significantly reduced number of ministers. But because of the pressures of the pushback that's coming to us from the criminal element, we have decided to put a bit more of the cabinet resource on the police and some aspects of security.
Still the chairman of the committee on...
You'll have to give that up. somebody else will be the chairman. So when the parliament comes up, the Minister of National Security ought not to be the minister in charge of the cabinet, the parliamentary committee on national security. He might be a minister of the committee, but he cannot be the chairman. Somebody else will be the chairman. And then people will report to the committee.
I'm just wondering, was this in any way an assessment on your part that the present National Security Minister may have had too much to deal with, or could not have?
As we try to do more, and so much trouble is coming to us from the police. I want to put it that way. We decided that, or I decided as Prime Minister, it's my prerogative to make that decision, that the minister was being distracted by too many other things when we wanted more focusing on the police at this particular point in time. So the government has put more effort into wanting to do that, right?
And does this move in any way reflect on your assessment of the performance of the police commission?
Not really. I think this is it's a group activity. I think all of us want certain things to happen. As I told you, when I met with all the security people, there will be different ideas as to what we can do and what we should do. And out of it would come an assessment as to what we can do. And as Prime Minister, I have made this assessment that we need greater focus on the police, separate and apart from national security in general. And therefore, I put that assignment in the Ministry of National Security with an experienced person to do that.
I'm going to ask what I think many people will ask at this point, which is that the government, your government, has one more year in its term left. And over the last 9 years or so, at various points, you, as Prime Minister, have three ministers currently. The Ministry of Education has 2 ministers. The Ministry of Agriculture has 2 ministers. At one point it had 3 when Nigel de Freitas was there. The Ministry of Works has 2 ministers. The Attorney General has 2 ministers. At one point there were 3. So the question I think a lot of people will ask themselves is, why did it take so long for you to come to the assessment that the most challenged of all the ministries in the cabinet needed this additional resource? Why after 9 years of struggling consistently, we now decide that a minister of state is necessary?
In that analysis that you've just made there's one thing that's missing, and it's the National Security Council. No other ministry has that institutional arrangement where a body of ministers is treating with national security. No other ministry has that. So to say that there was 2 ministers in works and 2 ministers in that, that's it in works. But the National Security Council in the cabinet that I run, there are about 6 or 7 ministers there, and in fact 3 or 4 of them alongside the Minister of National Security, including the Prime Minister. That's where national security has been dealt with. So it's not a question of numerically, well, you had 2 here and you give me 2 more here and you balance out. How the work was done was that there were far more ministers involved in national security than any other ministry. And the Prime Minister was always involved in national security. I could tell you, in recent times, I have spent more time on the issue of national security than on any other part of my portfolio. Right? So that's how it goes. So now I have decided, given the fact that we're still having this intractable problem and new problems from the police, that we need to have a bit more focus, because we think after we look at it and after I've assessed it, that is something that we can do at this stage. But it's not a question of, well, if we had another minister before, like works, like agriculture, something would have happened. We always had a large number of ministers on the business of national security. I could tell you, contrary to what you would have heard from people who talk in the parliament and have no responsibility for nothing, They would, oh, don't talk to the commissioner of police. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. On many occasions, I have met with commissioners of police, and I would have with me a number of persons from the Ministry of National Security, from the National Security Council, right? And we would meet, and they will relate to us, and we relate to them. That's how the government functions. The government cannot function as is on like the advice you get from some people, you know. Don't talk to this, don't talk to that, don't do this, don't do that. If I talk to the Commissioner of Police, there are members of the Parliament who accuse me of being a dictator, right? But then I'm supposed to be responsible for matters of the police, matters of National Security Council. I saw somebody saying to the Minister of National Security, you ought to have known that this was happening in SSA. But these are realistic situations. The bottom line is the government was never short of involvement in national security. And there's no other ministry where there's this, between the ministry and the cabinet, a layer of ministers. That's the only ministry that has that.
Of the ministry was being done by one person.
And Moses there with the...
Not necessarily. Where was Minister Moses at one stage? Or dealing with Moses. We had that before in the last government. In the last government, we had Moses, and he was doing immigration, right? But then we had when we came back on this occasion, we made some changes, and I decided we'll focus more heavily on using the national security team rather than a minister in the ministry. And now we're doing both.
Dr. Raleigh, I wanted to ask another question.
Okay.
Whether the government feels it is time to review the law to allow non-nationals to be recruited in the police service, whether there is a need for new talent, fresh ideas at the upper echelons of the police service, not necessarily the deputy commissioner and the commissioner. And particularly, even if you want to take the position that you don't want a foreigner like a Dwayne Gibbs or Siwaski, but CARICOM nationals, to open it up so that you have a wider pool of talent to draw on. Because clearly, we are stuck with the same people, and I don't know if the proposals that are coming out are necessarily fresh enough, innovative enough, and you need to have that injection.
It's always good to have an infusion of new blood into any organization. It can only be for the good. But the thing about us here in Trinidad and Tobago is that we want the omelette and we don't want the egg broken. We discussed this, and especially in the context of a commissioner of police. We are able to hire non-nationals as commissioner of police, because that's how Gibbs and Iwatsky got here. They were hired in response to what you're saying there, that bring somebody in, of course, and you know how that worked, right? Halfway through their contract, they were paid off and sent home. So their presence didn't hand us a panacea. But I still think that when the commission is recruiting people at the level of the commissioner and deputy commissioner, the commission, but if we change the laws because we have conceded or have come to the conclusion that is not a good thing, because we did have it. We had it there, and we had the experience of Gibbs and Iwatsky. Hold on. The idea of bringing a foreigner. Now, if you make it a situation now where sometimes you have a problem and you try to solve it, and by solving it by a certain action, you create new ones. If we broaden it to say, well, okay, senior superintendents, and so could come from abroad. For a start, I'm not sure that you have very many to choose from of quality, because many people of that skill don't really run around looking for jobs. But you really need, the real problem is proper succession planning and training in our police service. What we come up against is people who come up through the system. There are many people up there who may not have been properly prepared because there isn't a proper value system coming through. People still come through the police system based on first in, first up. Right? And then it's when you get to the very top now, where there's a commission now dealing with deputy commissioners and commission, that you have a choice being made for the top job. And I could tell you, I've been around this situation for quite a while, and it's not a pleasant place to be. That top of the police service, to fill those positions, it is not a very pleasant place. And for me, the long-term way of dealing with that is to have a proper succession planning system where mid-rank officers, their performance, their character, and their enthusiasm are harnessed to bring them up to the top. And of course, this system we must be the only country that has to, do calculus to appoint a commissioner of police. It's the only, I don't know, all my CARICOM colleagues don't have that problem. Commissioner of police, they hired, they retire, or they fired. In Trinidad and Tobago, it's a huge parliamentary rigmarole with a commission that gets cursed left, right, and center. They never accepted to do anything right. Whoever goes in the job, they don't come with any goodwill. They get attacked relentlessly, and some of them go mad and continue trying to get the country go mad. So that's our problem.
What about the police inspectorate?
The what?
The police inspectorate.
That is a proposal that came from yeah. But you see, an inspectorate by itself does not a police service make. Because you remember the police service, the Police Complaints Authority? Before that came into being, the recommendation was have a police complaints authority, and that authority will look at police behavior and get out of police good behavior because somebody's looking on. It's made no difference. It's made no difference. I would say today, the behavior of rogue police officers is worse today than before. So while you have to keep trying to improve it, there's no automatic confirmed situation that if you do this, that's going to happen. You have to just keep sustaining yourself on the job and having a sustained approach and take the positives from what works. I am all for the commission being able to hire people in, but then that's only the top. What about the body of the service? Where at an earlier time, some one or two people were introduced at officer level into the police service, and they brought something. That is something I have not seen being used for the longest while. I'm not aware of anybody being introduced. I remember when I wasn't around government, but I remember it was Lance Selman and Rodriguez, I think it was, who came into the police service at officer level, and that worked quite well. But nowadays, people seem to be more concerned about... Are you familiar with the police promotion system? Every time there's police promotion to take place, in the courthouse end up, in the courthouse. And then the whole system grinds to a halt, and it is not a very healthy place. And if there is something that can happen now with the introduction of this Minister for the Police, and these matters can at least come to the fore, then we might be able to benefit from a proper conversation.
Have you given Mr. Scotland any timelines, any indicators to say do this by this time or anything?
No, because that don't make no sense. You can't just hire someone and give them a timeline to do something like that. You will have a work program, but to say, well, I want to get this done and it will deliver the fruits by so and so days, not so. You don't go like that. You're trying to steer a ship that takes a long time to respond to the rudder. Right?
The murder rate, for example, is about 350 for the year so far. Is that something you would like to reduce the rate of?
Of course, we all want to bring it down to zero. We'd all like to bring it down to zero. But unfortunately, there are citizens in the country who don't agree with us. I mean, look, the other day somebody had to call me when the hurricane was coming down, bearing down on Tobago. A very unusual development, threatening life and limb. Hurricane coming out. Somebody in Tobago planning to kill somebody. The morning the hurricane passed in Tobago is a murder. Somebody killed somebody that very night. So when you are here thinking that this is what the normal human being would be focusing on, there are a number of our citizens who spend their time trying to kill people. That's a fact. That's a reality. So that's what we're dealing with, and you cannot disengage from that. You have to just keep trying everything that could work to see if that would bring some relief in some quarter. There's no one action that will bring it about. It's a series of actions.
Where does
Dr. Rowley?
the discussion take place? The criminological landscape. Men planning this, men planning that, the youth that are growing up vulnerable. Is there a sort of visionary, a think tank that you have?
No, people don't get born and grow up in think tank. It starts in the home. Then it gets into the community. And it gets out there as a nation. It starts in the home. Because every one of those killers have parents. They have brothers, they have sisters, they have neighbors, they have teachers, right? And then they have criminal friends. It's a societal problem that we are trying to deal with governmentally. Right? And another thing that's happening is that the society thinks that the government by itself could fix and should fix this. It takes more than that. Because when you look at the amount of resources that the government has made available to this problem, and the problem is so intractable, it should let you know. I mean, I'm sure there are people who believe that if I walk off this job tomorrow and you come and become the prime minister, the problem will be solved. It won't go so. It don't go so. Because I could tell you, I have a good idea of how much effort the nation has put out in trying to cope with the criminal element. And it's not a good idea because we have spent, a couple of years ago, national security budget crept right up to number 1 in the allocation. We're buying cars for the police. How many $1 million? I was just talking to the commissioner of police a few days ago, and she told me the number of police cars that are parked up in Wallerfield. I had to ask her, what number? Must be 1,000. And that is, you buy them, and you have to keep supplying them. You can't say, okay, you got 200 last year or 3 years ago, and you do with that. When I was going to school, and I break up my shoe playing football with lime, and they tell me, well, when you break up, you walk on the foot, barefoot. I ain't that. But no, you can't tell the police that. You have to give them what they need. And we have been doing that as far as the country is able to. You can't get them the whole budget. And of course, in another conversation, one of the comments to me was that we need more officers. Well, even before that recommendation came to us, we actually increased the amount of police service. We had 1,000 police officers added in the municipal department. And then we went looking at improving the output at the police barracks. But already, Trinidad and Tobago has more police per capita than the international average. So it's not just a question of throwing more officers. You've got to find out whether the ones you have are giving you value for money as well. And then when you come to the prison, it's a similar story. Right? The prison is a place where you keep people isolated from society as a penalty for what they have done. You probably are quite familiar with the stories that are going on in the prison, not only our prison, but nowadays in the prison, you have to manage prisoners maybe more than they're managing the criminals outside. Because the prisoners, using modern technology in a variety of ways, including calling in their own Air Force to drop firearms into the prison. That wasn't happening 30 years ago. There was no drone to do that. Nowadays, the prison, you have to manage inside the prison and the air above the prison. So the thing is changing all the time. And you just have to engage and engage and engage to bring about some acceptable level of public safety and security.
Dr. Rowley, Doris Polo, Guardian Media. You mentioned that MP Scotland can't be the chair of the Committee on National Security as well as be the minister in the Ministry of National Security. What about his legal practice?
No, to be a minister, he has to give up his practice. Because a minister's job is a full-time job for anybody. Minister Young has given up his lucrative practice a long time ago. But in the Parliament, to answer your question more specifically, committees in the parliament that are examining particular portfolios, the minister of that portfolio doesn't share it. Right?
You also noted that the National Security Minister was distracted by too many other things, and you went through a very long list of his purview, what he's responsible for, among other things, the ODPM. Is it time to revisit that and see whether things should shift from the National Security Ministry going forward?
Well, that when a government is appointed and a cabinet is appointed, the schedule is established by the Prime Minister. So most of these things are the sort of things that would be, but there's nothing to prevent the Prime Minister from taking something out from this schedule and put it in another minister's schedule. But these are the items that are deemed to be related and fall under the minister's schedule.
Are you preparing to look at it and review it?
Well, I think I just did that by putting somebody else there to make sure that each component here is looked at in a particular way. But that was driven largely by the issues that we need to ensure that the police is functioning on all cylinders, because we have been having issues that would cause us to think that we can do better in the policing.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Marie Fletcher, CNC3. You mentioned that there is a high number of rogue officers. You mentioned in the past that the previous ministers of national security had a hard time, right? I don't believe that you wanted to seem as though it's a trial and error of us trying to control this crime situation where we pick and we pick and we pick. But now you're including another minister, not replacing, but giving an additional resource. What different element do you think MP Scotland, now Minister Scotland, is going to bring about a change where crime is concerned? Focus
On a particular area. You know, special problems need special attention, and it's just a bit more focus. It's not magic. It's just that you spend more time on this issue. Whereas before he comes in, some of those issues would have been coming to National Security Council. Some would not have been attended. Some would get partial treatment. We just want to increase the focus.
On your mind for a while now, or what brought about?
Well, I'm constantly looking to see where we can make improvements and what decisions we can make that can be reasonable. And you mentioned the phrase trial and error. The criminal element is a constantly evolving cohort, you know. It's not to say that they put a brick in a wall and if you find the wall, you find them, you know. The criminal element is a live amoeba, you know. Right? And you just have to keep responding to them. I mean, look at what you report on an ongoing basis that people do that fall under the rubric of criminality. And sometimes you ask yourself, how do you think that up? And where is your humanity when you do that? A couple of days ago, some old man, you know, I think the postmortem is still going on. We haven't heard. Man in his house, they meet him dead with his hand behind his back, a 74-year-old man, for God's sake. And it's quite possible that if they do find the perpetrator, is some able-bodied person who could have looked for a job otherwise but chose to kill that man for his $10. That's where we are. And you see, talking policing as though policing is the be-all and end-all of this goes beyond policing, you know. What kind of person is reared by the community for whom the killing of a senior citizen is a normal thing to get $1? What is that?
Does the community need some kind of engineering to make people better and stop making such terrible decisions every week we see people making? I mean, where did we go wrong? What could we do right?
Something is going wrong. And not today, not since I've been prime minister. Something has been going on for quite some time. And I represent people, and I go to my constituency from time to time. And I could tell you, the best days out in my constituency when I go out there is when I go and visit a primary school. And you go into this primary school, and the children are so innocent and so excited and excitable, and you see such great promise in them. And I walk away from there sometimes thinking, what happens when they get to age 17 or 18, 19, 20? That batch, some of them end up doing some terrible things. And I had a reason at one time to be looking at the work of the social worker who works in the primary school. And all that glitters is not gold. Some of those primary school children live in conditions that are absolutely horrendous. And you only know that because when they talk to the social worker or the social worker examines their circumstance, you see what's happening to them. And you're saying, I mean, what is this? So we can't pretend that we know everything, and we mustn't pretend that we know everything or we have all the solutions. There are difficult situations there, and sometimes the difficulty, if you're not careful, can overwhelm you.
Minister, you had announced some time back recently a program where I think former Defence Force officers and so on, in this use of ensuring public services in what you would have called certain communities and so on. But any update on that?
Well, I did put that in the hands of a committee in the cabinet, and they worked on it, and it's at the stage now where it's got to the point now where we can begin to implement it. It has been, when I mentioned it, it sounded like something simple and straightforward. It turned out that nothing in the government is simple or straightforward. It had to be, it had to involve a whole lot more thought and action. And then the very last thing we came up against was ensuring that we comply with the procurement legislation. And, that. So we now got past that, and we are now in a position to begin to, by which time we're now close to the end of the fiscal year. We only got another 8 weeks or thereabouts. So hopefully it will be ready, and of course it will be pilloried as something for election. But for those who know when the election is, it will be said that it was that. But not at all. It was just that it took that long to perfect it, to be able to use it.
Just to clarify, this is not a social intervention program. This is about security.
It's all encompassing in terms of activities. It's activity oriented and problem solving. Where the community has an irritant problem that might be physical, you could try and get it done, get it out of the way. And where young people in particular, not so young people, create activities that would guide them towards spending their time in positive activities. Right? So that's what's going on. That was the outcome of the whole thing. Right?
Dr. Rowley?
I believe that in a lawful society, that if police call on citizens to help them apprehend a suspect, that it is necessary in a lawful society for people to be obligated to help.
Well, the level of that obligation in the current society will call into question the thought process that put that into the law. Because let us face it, witnesses are already reluctant to be a witness out of genuine fear for their safety. And the law really wouldn't want to put a person in harm's way. But if reasonable activity could be had, then it's a good thing. But what is reasonable activity? And I think that is where this stuff lies. Because I think many people, it has to be on a case-by-case basis. Because, if you see yourself in a position to assist an officer and you are a citizen that is public-spirited, you would. Now, assistance could come in one way or the other. If I see a policeman being beaten up and I get on my phone and trying to call for help, am I assisting? And if he calls me to come in and try to handle the person, and I believe that I'm not physically able to do so, or it is somebody who I'm genuinely afraid that might retaliate against me, is the law saying... So the law has some other descriptions, eh? So we have to see it in the context of reality. And so you can't say that there's no role for the citizen in assisting the police. By the same token, you can't say that a person should genuinely put his or herself in harm's way if you believe that in a certain kind of assistance, right, you would in fact be putting yourself in trouble. And assistance under the law is, as far as I'm aware, I'm not a lawyer, I don't want to take it on like that, but as far as I'm aware, assisting the police has not been defined, right? Because if I see you in trouble and I tell the magistrate, I run to go and get help for you, you'll tell me I didn't assist you? Because sometimes you might see something happen and you run to get help. Right? Or you might, shouting to call for help is assisting. Right? So I think we need to see it as on a case-by-case situation.
One major issue that is fueling crime in the country, Prime Minister, is the use of illegal guns and ammunition. What are you telling the public that the government is trying to stop the inflow of this?
Well, there's nothing new here. I mean, the government has, the illegal guns come either through illegal ports or through the legal ports. We have spent a lot of time and effort and resources focusing on, and we continue so to do, on ensuring that our borders are not as easily penetrated as they could be, because we are exposed to that, and we have had a lot of problems with that. But in recent times, we have also seen that our legal ports and our legal activities have not been as pristine as they should be. A significant amount of the harmful items have found their way into our country through our legal ports, and by people who either come through loopholes or get assistance from corrupt people. So all of these are all in the day's work in managing the country.
Have you had a recent update about the state of the Coast Guard in terms of their vessels and so on? If they need anything additional, is everything working?
The main thing that we have some significant assets, and those marine assets require continuous maintenance, servicing. And what we've been trying to do is to keep as many of them properly maintained so as to be able to be deployed, to do the work that they've been brought to do. One of the things we are doing right now, Cabinet just approved it, is moving towards having in Trinidad and Tobago our own ability to do the dry docking of the larger vessel that we bought. But we haven't been able to do that in time, so we've had to send those vessels out of the country to get the service that they need to bring them back and put them into service. Those are not minor items, and the Cabinet is always involved in that to keep them, and so far we have been keeping them, the new ones. The older ones, the diamond vessels, most of them have come, they all came in at a particular time. And as you use them, there comes a time when you have to spend significant effort and money on them. We've just completed a process which allows significant maintenance work to be done on the diamond vessels. But once again, we don't have in country the capacity to do what we want to do. So those vessels are now taken out of the country. I think they're going to Suriname. They'll be taken to Suriname on a regular basis, one by one, and we begin to get them back. So the very first one should be back here sometime soon, and then one by one, the Suriname dockyard would put aside that service, while we are aiming to build our own capacity here in Trinidad to do what we have them doing in Suriname. You may remember when we had the Panorama here as a coastal vessel, every year it had to go to Curacao to spend a month or two to be completely overhauled and so. So we've built up a significant capacity in marine assets. Some of them they work to destruction, others are maintained and overhauled and come back in again, and others are brand new that we try to keep. The two vessels from Australia, those are our main vessels now. Some from the Diamond Fleet, when they get repaired, the bigger ones, they come back in. Some of the smaller ones are beyond recall because they have been, the transoms have gone, they can't hold engines on them and so on. So it's a constant program of activity in the Coast Guard to keep those assets, or as much of them as possible, available. And of course, to have personnel who will respect them and make the best use of them. Because at the same time, you have people who, I did a patrol one night from Stobles to Scarborough, an all-night patrol. And I was able to see firsthand that there are people out there literally looking at you to see when you're not there to come into the country. Because they make that effort to come in here. And it's not feasible to have a line of vessels like a wall around our border. Plus, they get considerable help from nationals in Trinidad and Tobago who assist them with information and other things to allow them to penetrate. Even when they come here. I mean, I saw today in today's papers where a farmer went to an opposition meeting somewhere that the parliamentarians had a meeting, and a farmer was pointing out that live animals coming in on the south coast may be bringing disease into the country because he had seen some animals that were in fact appearing to be infected. Right? Now, that is a serious problem, eh? Because what we do have here is a pretty much, in terms of animal health, a fairly clean island nation because we have kept out certain animals from coming in here from certain places. And if in contraband, you're bringing in animals from South America where they have foot and mouth disease and other diseases. Recently there was an outbreak on a pig farm in South Trinidad in Erin, which we had to, quarantine the farm. But these are everyday things that we have to do to ensure that we preserve what we have. Right? And the law in the book is one thing, law enforcement is another thing, and just remember, the same amount of effort you're making to enforce the law, there are people making efforts to break the law. Right? So you just have to keep doing the best and continue, and be as aware and alert, and try to protect what we have by doing the best we can with what's available to us.
On Monday, the National Security Minister would have refuted reports that anybody from the SSA, any of the 28 employees would have been rehired. We have a recording that would have suggested that conversations were taking place along that line. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think the minister did what had to be done. If you were going to report that people have been rehired when they have not been, it falls to the government, the relevant officer, to correct the record. To the best of my knowledge, the minister was correct that there's nobody being rehired there. And of course, when the media is available to be an echo chamber for people who want to spread misinformation, that is something that is irritating. Because you have somebody who is not a part of the agency, running a political party with himself and two other friends, telling you what's happening in the SSA, and you just run and publish that just so as a fact. I didn't see anybody from the SSA confirming that that is so. And because I don't know anybody from the SSA who could tell you that anybody who was fired from there was hired. And of course, having put that there, then you make an analysis that the government didn't know what he was doing. The government doesn't know what it's doing. And the government is afraid of lawsuit. So the government had to hire them back. All because you want to make the government look bad. I could tell you here no. Right? I could tell you here no. In no country, none, not the English country, the Russian country, the American country, the Venezuelan country, the Trinidad and Tobago country, in no country, once you lost confidence in people in national security positions, that you put them there knowingly to run national security. That is one area where you're required to have confidence in the people that you put there. So for somebody to be telling you fired them last week and you're hiring them back this week, that is their story. That's not the government story. And in terms of talking about government afraid of somebody going to court, that's what the court is there for. If you feel that you have been wronged, then in our civil society, you go to the court and you tell the court what has happened to you, and then the evidence is presented in the court and the court makes a judgment. That's it. So we don't have to get upset about that. And the government doesn't have to be afraid about that. As a matter of fact, I go further. If you were listening to me for the last 9 years, You would have heard me telling the Defense Force, the Coast Guard, the police, and the prison. If you find people in these entities who are less than fit for purpose, get rid of them. And when you get rid of them in the proper way, if they are aggrieved, they will go to the court, and if they are to be compensated, they'll be compensated. But the one thing that you can't have is agencies populated by people who are in fact operating inimical to the public interest. You would have heard me saying that. The last time I remember saying that when we commissioned CG 41 and CG 42, I said that to the Coast Guard, and I say it to the police, and I say it here now, right? There are some people in our security agencies who have no business being there. So the government will protect the public interest by doing what has to be done. So you in the media, don't let people chain you up to write misinformation. It would help if when they come to you with them things, go to the source and get it confirmed whether that is so. Right? I take the paper, they're hiring back people in the SSC. And I say, which SSC? Which one?
Have you received any new updates in terms of the ongoing audit being carried out by the acting director of the SSC?
As I said to the Parliament, that work is going on and will continue for quite some time. And a lot of the work that is going on now is police work. Because enough information has come up which has attracted the attention of the police. Right?
In terms of the director's examination, as it were, is there a time when you expect to get a final report?
No, we just follow the evidence and follow the situations. And that is why I did talk to you in March, when the matter became public, and at that time I told you I will speak to you again, public again, when sufficient information is known. I came back on the 1st of July, and I told the nation enough to indicate that we have some problems that we're dealing with, and how some of it was dealt with. But most importantly, I told the nation that we are aware of it, and criminal investigations are taking place. Investigations. And I am not an investigator, and it is not for me to determine when the investigation is concluded or who is affected by it. But what I do know is that the information coming to the government has resulted in significant police investigations which are ongoing. Interestingly enough, there are some people, right, with cocoa in the sun, who are trying to tailor the national narrative to give you the impression that what the government is saying or doing is either capricious or just plain stupid. Let me tell all of you this. That is for their benefit. But that would not lead the government astray. The police will do their investigations, and their findings will determine what happens. I hear people say, oh, nobody ain't get locked up, nobody ain't get locked up. How do you get locked up in this country? Evidence is gathered, collated, and presented, and it's not presented to the government. It's presented to the courts. Okay? So let us not get carried away by people who have their own agendas. These are very serious matters, and some of them are quite dangerous.
Prime Minister, you mentioned your visit to India and Indian investors having interest in the rice mill. We also know we had visitors, Indian businessmen and investors interested in the refinery. I know you receive there's been a lot of talk from the opposition, from political parties, and also from the OWTU concerning the sale of the refinery. Can you get an update on that? We're seeing Ansel Roger and other members of OWTU bringing photos of yourself, calling for a national debate with you. I mean, what's your response to that?
All of that contributes nothing. All of that contributes nothing to solving the problem that we have. With respect to the refinery, the problem is that we have a refinery. What is it, 100 years old? We have a refinery which we have had to close because of reasons given. I need not go over that now. The people who are talking, especially in the political arena, about this refinery, many of them know that what they're talking about don't make no sense. But it's either that's how they spend their day, or they believe that by extracting sentiments and emotions out of it, it will benefit them. The government can't spend its time and effort engaging in that. Somebody has to run the country. Somebody has to see if anything better can be done with the refinery. I must say, though, that news of someone interested in the refinery or some entity or company or what, 4 years or 5 years after the refinery has been shut down, that refinery has been there, is coming up on 6 years. There are many refineries around the world that have been shut down and remain shut down for a long time, you know. Our refinery has been shut now and it's 6 years. We keep that refinery preserved in the hope that we may be able to attract some user. And once the refinery is operating, it's good for the economy. But we chose not to operate it because it was a loss-making entity for us because of the oil supply situation. I would have thought that people who are interested in the well-being of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, hearing and seeing an interest in what is the fourth time or whatever, many times we've gone out inviting people to see if any one of them or any number of them may look at in our direction. I went to the Guyana Energy Conference, and one of the main reasons why I went, and when I spoke there as a feature speaker there, I said to an audience of 2,000 people, many of them oil barons of one kind or the other, saying to them, we have a refinery in Trinidad and Tobago, and if there are any of you who might be interested in using it, come and talk to the company in Trinidad and Tobago. That's how we did an advertisement. So I don't know why is it so detrimental that someone who was invited by a group in India who was coming to see us, someone came through this country in a courtesy call, not bidding, not putting in a bid, because to the best of my knowledge, the company that they're carrying on about has not put in a bid. It was only to see whether they have an interest in the situation. But of course, the reception has been so warm, right? And so welcoming that I think we're better off chasing them away. Some people think so. I would have thought that people would have been happy to know that there are people who at least looking to see if they have an interest in it. But I'll tell you all something though. You may not believe it. There are some people in this country who believe that the country must fail for them to succeed. Let me repeat that, in case you don't understand it. There are some people in this country, as they go about their business and their agenda, it is all about the country must fail so that they will succeed. Because they can only succeed because their conversation is always about negative and about failure. This government is not a part of that. We try to succeed in difficult circumstances. Right? With every passing year, it will become more difficult to have that refinery utilized. And we are no different to other people who close their refinery for economic reasons. One of the complaints that was being made is that this gentleman from India, who they don't know, I don't know him either, the Prime Minister must tell the country if it's Venezuelan oil that he coming to bring here. So if there's a company that has access to Venezuelan oil and would want to bring that oil to refine in Trinidad and Tobago, why is that a bad thing for some people? Especially when we closed the refinery because there was no adequate supply of oil to prevent the Minister of Finance from spending hundreds of millions of US dollars in trying to run the refinery with imported oil. Venezuela has the largest reserve of oil in the world. And we are 7 miles from Venezuela. And I wish we could find a way to get Venezuelan oil to come here. At one point we did. At one point, when Venezuela was producing at peak some oil is being refined here because we weren't producing enough and we had capacity. Where we get these idiots from who believe that Venezuelan oil coming here is a bad thing and you must pillory the prime minister and come with all kind of conspiracy theories about corruption, especially when you yourself is corruption. I could tell you it would be a very bad thing if we are constantly trying to attract foreign investment into this country, but there are people in the political arena claiming to want to be the next government, and all they could do is threaten any investor who may want to invest here as to what they could do and what they wouldn't do when they get into government. Because if I was an investor and that was the environment, I don't think I would be as attracted to it as I normally would be.
What if the investor, the potential investor, has corruption charges against him? Isn't that a concern for the government?
Of course, it's a concern, but you have to determine what you're dealing with. Is it that the individual you're dealing with, or a company? Because very many companies around the world have had issues. And as I said this recently. Boeing has just had a criminal charge laid against it. Boeing, that makes planes. Our planes, all our jets are Boeing jets. Boeing plead guilty to criminal charges. Are you going to say that because Boeing has been found guilty of a criminal charge for a particular issue within the Boeing empire, right, where individuals may be held accountable in there, that we should stop using Boeing? As I speak to you now, we have orders for Boeing planes, I think. Are we going to cancel those orders? And then what is worse, to portray the Prime Minister of the country as somebody who, if he talks to anybody, is a deal he making for himself. If that is your standard, please don't weigh my corn in your bushel. I have been talking to people for 9 years about their business in Trinidad and Tobago, trying to attract them to spend their money in Trinidad and Tobago. That is my job. And if there are people who, when they had that job, they did it in a corrupt way, then don't measure me in that. Unless you could show this country where I have done something wrong, you have to give me the benefit of the doubt. You think when we got those companies to pay extra money off the contract, billions of dollars that the contract didn't call for, you think it's because I went to negotiate for something for myself? And how many people have I spoken to? In what area? I am the office in this country, the face of that office, the voice of that office, that represent the people of Trinidad and Tobago and their interests. But those jokers on the other side, I go to Australia, where money hard to get in Trinidad and Tobago, got Australian money to buy vessels for the Coast Guard and ferries for the Inter-Island Service. These idiots wrote the Australian opposition without a shred of evidence, seeking to incite the Australian opposition against me and Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And when that didn't work, they wrote the Australian Attorney General, attempting to make inferences and infer that there was corruption in the dealing between Australia and Trinidad and Tobago, sovereign dealing state to state. The Australian people don't think that their Prime Minister talking to me is a corrupt act, you know. It's in Trinidad and Tobago that these idiots believe that me talking to Malcolm Turnbull is a corrupt act. And it wasn't only me, you know. Under Patrick Manning, when we first went to buy those vessels from Vosper Thornycroft, Wade Mark wrote the British Serious Fraud Office without a shred of evidence and implied and stated that Patrick Manning was engaged in corruption when all we had was an open international RFP. The Italians bid, the British bid, and an evaluation committee selected Vosper Thornycroft. But they have to create a scene or a scenario, a theory, that once the government is involved, is corruption. That is not us. That is you, not us. Yeah? So when you see talking about who corrupt and who, and you know what galls me with this? The leader of opposition business in the parliament is on $1 million bail and waiting to be a minister of government in this country. Another one resigned from the parliament under live sport, $400 million of murder and mayhem, waiting to become minister of government. Another one come out of jail in Lebanon, he waiting to be a minister too. And these are the people who are chasing people from this country, talking about who corrupt, and trying to imply that my actions are corrupt action. One of these days, this country could put God out its thoughts and put them in charge of this country. Then you'll have a good comparison between what is good government and what is not.
You mentioned that no bid was made, right? But just give us an idea. You said this company is interested as far as the Indian investor. What's the process like going on so far? Give us
The
an
company
update.
that is handling that is taking, they went out inviting interest, called a request for proposal, RFP, proposal. To the best of my knowledge, the company that is exciting them like that, at the time when they came to Trinidad and Tobago, had made no proposal. They were only interested in, they came to see whether it is something they would want to do because they are investors. That company is a major company in India. They produce 40% of India's steel, so they make money. They don't only invest in India, they are investing in Oman, they're investing in Africa, they're investing in the Caribbean. Well, they come to the Caribbean for the first time, looking at the Caribbean, because I have been inviting people like that to come to the Caribbean. Prime Minister Motley has been doing the same thing. Prime Minister Gaston Brong has been doing the same thing. Prime Minister Irfan Ali have been doing the same thing, because we are promoting our region as an area of investment. But what we have in Trinidad and Tobago, you don't have in the other countries. In the other countries, you don't have our opposition are chasing foreign investment.
Mr. Jindal has abandoned that idea.
I don't know the proposal. The period ends on the 31st of this month. So until the 1st of next month, we wouldn't know who would have put in proposal, because they all have until then. And then the, what's his name? Petrotrin Heritage will say what they got. And that is what it is. So even while the process is on the way like that, this attack on people, and I tell you one thing, that attack on a potential investor is not only negative in that investor, you know. You're creating an environment of hostility. So other people who may have considered, because it has come to my attention that another potential interested party has been inquiring as to whether or not this political attack on Jindal is what Trinidad and Tobago is. And who is to say no? Who is to speak on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago? Wade Mark? So I started off today by telling you all about the need for revenues, the need to preserve our standard of living by finding the revenues to support it. If the best way to do that is to chase away foreign investors who come in here to spend their money, we don't have the money. There was a time when we had some money and we spent and did some things. We have to keep attracting investors into Trinidad and Tobago. How often you hear people talking about no forex, no forex, no forex? We don't print that here. We have to earn it. Every US dollar we spend, we have to earn it first before we spend it. And if we are going to earn it, we need the assistance of the international community to invest in our country. Even the richest country in the world, the biggest, richest country in the world, goes out and looks for investment. When the American president travels abroad and he meets people in Saudi Arabia or in Korea or in Taiwan or wherever and attract them to come and buy American goods, that's what the leader of a country does. And foreign investment is the way in which you use your own resources and the resources of other people to improve your own circumstances. That's what it is. And if you have people in your country whose job it is to chase away people who come to invest in this country, you have to ask yourself, in whose interest are they acting? In whose interest? Their own interest. because they believe that by doing that, they will win an election, because they're all about election. One in Tobago, tell an investor, we know it's a good project, but don't come until I'm in office. Chase away the investor. And as fate would have it, he was in office. Didn't last as long as Miss Janie Fire, but we lost the investment already. So I can only say so much and do so much. I'll tell you one thing. Let it not be said that when this government was in office, for as long as he was in office, with every day, we attempt to make it better for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you all very much, and have a good day, and see you soon.
I'm very proud to be a Big Ride winner. I just got